I'm Tim. This PCB Sync.
A lot of companies are doing EMI troubleshooting for the first time. They always focus on the pre-filter, ferrite beads, and shielding cans, but sometimes the real problem is inside the PCB, not because the signal traces are bad, but because the return path is lost. It gets lost. Today, let's take a look at why a ground plane that looks perfectly normal can send your board straight to an EMI test failure. EMI isn't some kind of mystical force. It doesn't just appear out of nowhere. Most of the time, the problem comes from one thing: a large return loop. The signal goes out from here and exits over there. But the return current takes a huge detour. When the return path area gets bigger, it starts to act like an antenna, radiating signals outward. Then the spectrum analyzer starts going off. Congratulations, you've just triggered the hidden boss. The classic mistake is having a slot under the signal trace. The signal line might look neat, but the return path underneath gets cut off, so the return current has no choice but to go around the slot. It's like a highway suddenly being closed. Your GPS reroutes you all the way around the city. Sure, you can still get there, but the cost is a much bigger loop. In a circuit, that means higher inductance and more EMI. A lot of people think that only slots will cause problems, but actually, components can too, like large solder pads, connectors, holes, shielding cases, solder pad screw-holes, isolated areas, and so on. If any of these happen to be right under the NF trace, the return path will still be forced to detour. So when doing RF layout, don't just look at the signal trace on the top layer, you have to check if the return path underneath is blocked. So how do you fix it? First, move the signal trace. Don't let it cross over those areas. Second, move the components. Don't let large solder pads or holes block the return path. Third, add stitching vias. If the return current has to change layers, build a bridge for it. Don't make it find its own way. If the RF current has to detour on its own, it usually won't. End well for you. In KCD, I recommend checking like this. First, display the RF traces. Second, switch to the bottom or inner ground layer. That is the reference ground layer for this trace. Third, follow the RF trace and check if there's a complete reference ground underneath. Fourth, if the return path is broken, either reroute the trace, move the component, or add stitching vias. Finally, run a check. But please remember, BRC can only check the rules. It won't tell you if the physical layout is comfortable or not. So let's take a look at it in the tool. Here, I intentionally made a mistake. The method is this. The red line is the RF trace, and the blue area is the ground plane on the bottom layer, which is right below the RF trace. I opened a keep out zone here, so in this section, there's no ground plane. When the signal passes through here, the return current has to detour around both sides. This is a common issue we see. This is the type of mistake. Now that we've gone over everything, what exactly would you say are some of the correct practices we just finished discussing together? One of them is to route around the slot. I can have the RF trace go around it, which ensures the ground plane provides a complete return path. The return current can follow along underneath the transmission line. Or if we add plenty of stitching vias on both sides of the trace, we can also ensure that, when necessary, the signal can switch and maintain the shortest return path. So, in the end, let's remember 5 key points. First, EMI is not some mysterious thing. Large loops act as antennas. RF traces should never cross slots. Don't block the components. If the return current needs to cross, add a via for it. You might think you're fixing EMI, but actually, you're just making a path for the return current. You're fixing the way home for the current. The PCB won't give you an error, but the spectrum analyzer definitely will. Thanks for watching.